All right, guys. So, biggest mistakes new land flippers make. So, guys, we're going to talk about mistakes we've done, things that we see that new land flippers make, and that we want you to catch kind of going on. So, we're going to go over that. But yeah, Hunter, first, anything that you would go back and tell yourself before you flipped your first piece of land or something, but now you know, obviously being an experienced land investor, and we can kind of jump in that way.
Yeah, so for me, the first thing that I wish I would have told myself before flipping my first piece of land was when I first started, I started marketing to Arizona, which Arizona doesn't mean it's a bad or a good place.
Yeah.
I would personally start out there at the beginning, but something that I did is I was doing mailing at the beginning and I sent out a bunch of pieces of mail to, they're called landlocked properties, or they can also be called in Arizona desert squares, where I pulled all the data and I used an older platform that's been around for a long time. It's called PropStream. I don't use it anymore because it doesn't filter out a lot of things, and I wasn't able to filter out parcels of land that don't have any access. And so I sent out thousands of pieces of mail to these ones. Probably like 30% of that, maybe 30-40% of that mailer went out to actual areas that there was actually access to these parcels, and then the rest of them were to all these other parcels that I couldn't even get to, so they were just worthless. And I had people calling me back for about a year saying, "Hey, yeah, I'd love to sell this." So I was like, "I don't want to buy this," and so I wasted thousands of dollars doing that. That is probably what I would say. Just do not start. Just make sure you're pulling the right data when you're starting out, so that you're not wasting a ton of money.
Yeah, yeah, I would totally agree with that. I was in the same situation too before. Obviously, the software we use now, it's called Land Portal. So we didn't really have that when I first started. So I did similar kind of stuff. You're pulling data, but you don't know if it's landlocked. You don't know if there's wetlands, floodplains, slope, all these kind of things. And we'll talk about due diligence because that's a big thing. I think a lot of people, especially just new getting into land investing. But yeah, I've done that too, where I would do mailers, you'd send them out, and then you get excited, they sign a purchase agreement, and then you look at the land and you're like, there's no road access. This is a FEMA floodplain. There's wetlands. There's no way I'd even buy this property. So I agree. That's definitely a big one. Talk about skipping due diligence. I think that's a big thing that people just getting started don't really understand how important that is. And I know you're great at obviously data and those kind of things.
Yeah, so having proper due diligence is a difference between you being able to confidently buy a piece of land and then sell
Yeah.
it, and between you buying something and having to hold on to it for years because you didn't look at one
Yeah.
thing. If you do proper due diligence, you can have a 99%, you can feel 99% confident. There's always that 1% that anything could happen,
Yeah.
but if you could do it, it's like 99.9% you could feel confident in it if you're doing the right stuff. Some of the main things that you want to be looking at, we referenced some of them, just looking at if there's FEMA floodplain on the property, if there's wetlands on the property, if there's physical and legal access to the property. Difference
Mhm.
between physical and legal access is that you can legally get to it. So say you're on a road, you legally can walk from the road over to your house or to your
Mhm.
piece of land. Physical access is, yeah, maybe you can walk over to it, but maybe it's a sheer cliff where you can't physically walk onto the land because it's impossible to get to. And then there's a ton of other things that we go through,
Yeah.
but that's some of them. And then one thing that I never saw on a due diligence checklist when I first started, that I had to figure out myself the hard way, is we get droners out to our piece of land before we buy them to walk the land. But there was never on any due diligence checklist that I was using. We were buying this piece of land and we bought it and it was a really great deal, but we didn't check to see if there was a bunch of trash on properties next door, and
Yeah.
that was never
Yeah.
really referenced as something to even check out. Or it wasn't even on a property that was next to ours. It was at a property that was at the beginning of the road, so people had to drive through these really gross properties. There's just trash all over them. And the
Okay.
droner didn't say anything to us, and it was just, it kind of took a hit as far as the valuation. We were still able to sell it, make about like $10,000 to $15,000. We thought we were going to make a lot more. But yeah, it's just there's a couple of things that people don't realize that they need to be checking. And I know I left out a decent amount of the due diligence steps, but those are some of the main ones. What about you?
Yeah, the other one just being like slope, wetlands, and then yeah, just access. Those are the big things. And then also just checking if they have the deed, take a look at that. I'm trying to think of other major stuff. There's obviously we have a huge checklist of stuff that we go through. But yeah, similar to what Hunter was saying, like getting like a Google Earth shot of the road just so you can see like what else is going around there. Electrical, obviously, water, all those kind of things as well. And also talking to a realtor is really important because I know I had one where I was going to buy it and I didn't know there was a landfill less than a mile away. And he's like, don't buy in this area. It's not going to sell. So you do have to really get granular with it, especially once you get the contract signed to like, hey, let's double check everything, talk to the county, et cetera, to make sure everything checks out before you get too far ahead of yourselves.
Exactly. No, I think that's super true. And like I said, that sounds scary for people starting out, but if you just follow
Yeah.
kind of a simple checklist that has all the main things, like you'll be 99%. Like we said in the past, like even with some of these mistakes I made starting out, I've never lost any money on any deal that I've done, and neither has Kevin. So it's not really that high of a risk thing if you're just checking the right stuff. Real quick as well, Kevin, what about counties? I know this is a huge one people always talk about. Like, what about how do I know it's a good county versus a bad one? And what do have you seen yourself and also other maybe beginners get wrong about that?
Yeah, I think a big thing for me is what I try to tell people is make sure there's enough data there, meaning there's enough properties that have been sold. Because the worst thing you ha can happen is you get a lead in, and then there's not enough properties to actually comp, and then you're reaching out to realtors, and they're not always great about getting back to you. So that's a big thing. Make sure there's enough data, and obviously stuff is moving, so stuff is selling, days on market. It's not sitting for 6, 12 months. So those are big things. And then also what we'd like to do is do a county or two outside of a larger city because we do more rural land, so 2 acres and above. So those are big things. And then just really even the kind of land too. So a lot of people, like Hunter was saying, like Arizona, you have to stay away from states that are like all farmland or areas that are like super, super sloped. Obviously, you can still buy properties there, but it's harder. So you need to be careful about those kind of things too. Anything that you're thinking of, Hunter, that I didn't mention?
No, I think just one thing that people that I don't see people talking about a lot that I think is a really big indicator that people just throw out of the side don't think
Mhm.
about is they're looking at the sold for sale ratio or that kind of stuff, seeing how many pieces of land are sold versus how many are for sale and what the ratio is and stuff like that. And that's great. One big thing though is looking at pending sales in an
Yeah.
area because
Yep.
you could look at an area and be like, oh wow, nothing's really moving in this area. But then you can go over to the pending sales and see, oh, there's four pending sales in this area. That means that area is starting to move, and a lot of other investors will just breeze over that county saying, oh, it's a bad county. But that I love those because people don't really think about that a lot of the time. So that was just one thing I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then what about for new land flippers for overpricing? What kind of stuff maybe you've done or stuff that you've seen some of our members and stuff do that can get them in trouble a little bit?
Yeah, there's honestly learning how to price. There's AI tools and all these things, but none of
Yeah.
them are 100% accurate yet, which will be nice when they are, but who knows when that's going to actually happen.
Yeah.
They're good for seeing like, general outlook of how what maybe around the price is going to be that you're going to be able to sell it for. But
Yeah.
what I see of people overpricing is they don't know how to comp correctly and or they were taught incorrectly or they just haven't seen enough comps done in real
Just
time.
deals in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
deals in general. So they just go over and they see different comps in an area and they see, oh, look at this one. This one sold for 500,000 and all the other ones around it have a pretty common theme of at 5 acres they're selling at about 50,000, but they're like, "Oh, mine's going to sell at this 500,000 price." And they
Yeah.
think that maybe that's what they're going to do. And also another thing that they don't take into account is maybe all these other ones are selling at 50 or 50,000 or all these ones are listed at 50,000. You want to be a little bit under that. So they kind of
Yeah.
maybe have a little bit too much of an optimistic view of what they're going to be able to sell it for. And I always like to go underneath competition so you know that you're going to sell it quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I would say also too, watch out for the outliers, especially if you're looking on Zillow. The one will just won't make sense, so don't obviously take that into account when you're comping out the land. But I think the biggest thing, especially for new land investors, it just takes time, honestly. Comping, obviously, we both have comped thousands of properties now. The first 6 to 8 months, I still didn't really feel that confident. So that's why it's nice to have someone in your corner that's obviously has experience, has looked at tons of properties and has a better idea. And comping similar properties too. A lot of times you're like, oh, this one went for this. It's a totally different type of property. not as much road frontage, or it's totally wooded, or there's water. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into comping that honestly just takes time to learn, which it's nice to have someone to help you out with that kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Without having
Yep.
other people to help me, I
Yeah.
would not know where I was going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so another thing that we want to talk about a little bit is why do you think beginners and why did you personally too, Kevin,
Yeah.
hesitate and what does hesitation actually cost them as far as when they're making offers and how do you get comfortable making those offers when you're brand new and scared?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are one just scared in general because a lot of people don't haven't talked to sellers before, so they don't even know how to negotiate or make the offer. So that's obviously why it's nice to have help there. And a lot of people are worried about their pricing. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to offer too high or too low." And then obviously there's a lot of psychology to negotiating and making offers. And then, okay, what's next? Do I send out the contract to them? What happens here? So that's why I help and knowing the exact process or like when you do have questions. But I think a lot of people just hesitate and they're just like, oh, I'm not exactly positive this is perfect. The contracts we do, we can back out of them. So it's not like it's the end of the world if we get a contract signed. So I think that's one of the biggest things is just not knowing what you're doing, to be honest, when you're first getting started. I don't know. What about you, Hunter? Obviously, I came from houses. It wasn't as hard for me because I'd literally done 100 deals in houses. So it came pretty natural, but not knowing that, I can imagine starting making offers.
No,
So
yeah, exactly. And that's why our main specific target audience is house wholesalers transitioning
yeah,
over to a different asset class so they can put these their skills like you had when you first started
yeah,
into a better asset class. Yeah, and so I don't know, I feel like the thing for me is just people yeah, getting comfortable, but then I think that they just are really their analysis process, there's so many new things they're learning and they don't want to make a mistake that they're going to lose thousands of dollars. But like you said, we can back out of anything that we have with our contract. And also, if you're starting out with one of our recommended marketing channels, which is texting or cold calling,
yeah,
you're not going to really lose a lot because probably your first, second, or even third person, or maybe many more after that, that you're talking to on the phone that you're giving offers to, probably aren't going to be that great anyway because you're not going to be comping it right. And just getting those repetitions of getting that feedback of, oh, I offered them this much, and then you were able to talk to a more experienced investor and be like, oh, that was actually wrong. That in and of itself will help you
yeah.
move forward way quicker than people that are just in their head the whole time.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just taking reps, talking to sellers in general, you're just going to get better and better. It's like anything. If you're lifting, you're going to get stronger. So if that's something, it just takes time and you'll get better. But obviously, having a system in place and someone to help you out is going to be a huge advantage for you for sure.
Exactly, exactly. And so, what do you think the biggest mistake that you have seen some of our students make in their first 90 days, or even you?
I would say the biggest mistake, definitely probably picking the right state to market to. I've seen that obviously a couple times already. And obviously I'm very open book about I've done deals in 7, 8 different states. I'm fine with telling them like, hey, I already know you can get and you can get deals honestly anywhere, but you just have to be careful because there's definitely certain states. And obviously we buy and flip, so either we use our own money or obviously we have a network of funders in our community or we double close. So there's certain states you can't double close in. And I like to have that tool in my tool belt. So there's certain states you want to stay away from, like South Carolina, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Those are ones you can't double close in. So I don't really have that tool in my tool belt when they want a higher price where I still can make profit. So I would say the biggest one so far, probably picking the state and the right county, and then just like reaching out to them and making that offer is the other probably big one, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. Just not, yeah, I agree with that. And the thing is, I have another question I think is interesting that I kind of want to answer. So it says, what's one thing that looks like a mistake but actually isn't that beginners might think? So what I think is sometimes people expect, oh, I'm gonna pull 100 or even 1,000 records and I'm gonna
Yeah.
text them or I'm gonna call them or mail them. And I didn't get a deal from that. I must have chose a bad area, and that's just not how it is. Even if you, sometimes even if you're pulling a 5,000 records, sometimes even 10,000 records, you won't get a deal. But the thing is, it doesn't mean you aren't gonna get a deal. It just it means you didn't get a deal from them in that time frame that you thought you would, and you're gonna get a
Yeah.
deal if you're pulling 10,000 records and you're doing texting or cold calling, and you're doing it in a efficient way, in a granular way, you're gonna get a deal. It just might not be your first month, it might not be your second month, but you're going to get a deal within the first 90 days, 100%. And then those other deals, if you're following up them like you should, having a good, robust CRM, you're going to be able to be getting the deals from those ones as well, whether that's in a couple months or maybe in a year, maybe even multiple years. It's just you have to have a good follow-up system to be able to get this. So I think that's
Yeah.
one thing that people are like, oh, I must have chosen a wrong market. But if you just have very simple criteria where you're going to be choosing for your county or your zip codes, however you decide to do it, and you
Mhm.
don't get a deal on it, it doesn't mean that it was a waste of time or a waste of money because that's just how it is. And it's all a follow-up game and it's all a kind of numbers game at some point.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback off that. Follow-up is so important. Obviously, I came from houses where that's everything. Obviously, there's multiple people calling on the same day. Land is an open gold mine, like where there just isn't as many. Obviously, people are getting letters and stuff like that, but they aren't getting text that much. They aren't being cold called. Not everyone's ready to sell right this second. A month from now, a medical or anything can pop up where they need money and they're ready to sell. So if you've got a follow-up system where, hey, I'm calling this person each month just chatting for a few minutes, 5 minutes, you're going to catch them when they're ready to sell, or they're going to be like, hey, Hunter's called me for the last 3 months. We've had great conversations. I'm ready to sell now. I'm going to reach out to Hunter rather than someone else that, unfortunately, what I see too, coming from houses to land investors are really lazy, to be honest. If they don't get they'll call them once, text them. Unless it's a super hot deal, they'll follow up. But following up is so important. And maybe they just say, hey, give me a call back in a month. They don't call them. It's like, if you just follow up with these people, you're going to get deals. And unfortunately, like land isn't as competitive, so people don't have to do that yet. But if you take that advantage and you are following up, you're going to get so many more deals than everyone else, is what I would say. But yeah.
I like that. I like that. And that's why we're excited to work that we have been working with and are excited to work with people that are like you coming over from
Yeah.
houses because we know that they have that fire in them that they're going to be wildly successful in this business. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, that I think that kind of wraps it up. Unless you wanted to say anything else, you can cut me off. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I was just gonna say also too, guys, if you are wholesaling houses or flipping houses, land, honestly, like when you come over and start doing land, you're gonna be like, why was I not doing this 5, 10 years ago? That's basically my mind frame. When I came over, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. Because yeah, what I was doing, I literally was calling 50 people a day every single month. And then I would talk to them. Three other people would talk to them that same day. Like, land is not like that. It's untouched. Like, there's no HGT flip this land. No one really knows about it. Obviously, there's people in it, but you're going to take the tools that you already know in houses and just going to crush it in land. So that's why we love working with people that are in houses coming over to land. Like, you already know everything. Obviously, you don't know all the pieces to land, but we can teach you that very quickly and you can be very successful. So yeah, I just end it with that, I think.
yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it. Well, we'll see you guys next time and have a great rest of your day.
Yep, thanks guys.